Okay, here, I have a question for you guys. I'm wondering if like this idea that like the unknown is feminine, is that inherently true, or is that an inherent aspect of femininity that it's unknown and mysterious, or is that just a male perspective of femininity?
I agree with you. I know you didn't make a statement, but I
Well,
agree with that. I think I see both like the yin and the yang. It's within the dark is the light, and within the light is the dark. The unknown, the chaotic, has a feminine quality to it, but it also has a masculine quality to it as well. They're expressed differently, but nonetheless, I would agree with Arielle in a sense that yeah, that might be the male way of perceiving the feminine. Since we don't have an idea what's going on with women. What the hell?
So Peterson specifically addresses that, which is he's like, well, why is femininity associated with the unknown? And he's like literally the genitalia of male and female, like female genitalia are just like hidden inside. And so like even it like before the modern era, like even women didn't really know what was going on in there. They were just like, yeah, it's just a hole,
Right.
We don't really know what's inside, babies come out, I guess. But but like the male genitalia is very much on the outside. It's very much visible and very much known. So I think that's what Peterson says. So maybe he's wrong, but I think that's why. And the other thing is, yes, it's probably true that it was like all of these mythologies were mostly written by men. So
here's another metaphor to talk about that. So Gaia, which is the most feminine, like explicitly sort of feminine archetype of the Greek mythology, is Earth, and Earth is sort of like Earth literally means like the dirt, like the ground, right? And then when you plant seeds, you literally put a seed in a hole and cover it in the darkness, and then magic happens, and then something blooms, right?
Right.
So like you can find this thing.
It's like a black box. Yeah. Step 1. Step 2, question mark. Step 3. New life.
There is magic in a lot of it too, though. Like you can.
It's not quite like planting a seed in the ground, though. Like that's kind of the Greek metaphor for. That was what the Greeks thought that like reproduction was. That it was just like the male seed and the female earth. So they didn't think that they didn't think that there was any hereditary that was contributed by the mother. That it was all just like came through the father.
Right.
And it's
like obviously wrong though.
Well, it's
except
not really,
when the sex of the baby was not a male.
That's what they believed. I mean, they didn't realize that the female contributes half the hereditary.
But I mean, you can just
the only thing women got blamed for was
they
the
look
baby
like their
was
mom.
born. They couldn't produce a male. The only thing women got blamed for there was the inability to produce a male, right? Like, so like you're saying that they didn't have women weren't regarded as contributing to sort of the genetic makeup of the child, but then ironically they would get blamed if she failed to produce any male heirs.
And ironically, that's like the one thing that is actually 100%. Well, maybe not 100%, but like
the male's fault.
But that is the male's fault,
sperm's fault.
Actually, based on fertility timing, you can actually influence the sex of your child by somewhere between like 75 and 80%, depending on when you actually have sex.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you're saying like the sex of your sperm like varies throughout the day?
No, it's about the woman. It's about her ovulation cycle. Male sperm tend to swim faster, but they die faster. Female sperm swim slower, but they have longevity. So depending on where she's at in her ovulation cycle, if she's say 3 days out, your sperm can survive for a few days. So if you only have sex, say 3 or 4 days out, then most of the male sperm are going to die, and the females have a much higher chance of fertilizing.
It wouldn't be a day-night thing, but rather a moon cycle sort of situation.
An ovulation cycle.
Yeah.
If you want to make the moon analogous to ovulation cycle, then yeah.
And they now think like the egg plays a much more active role than they used to think. Like the egg kind of selects between sperm and picks the one that's the best.
Huh.
As it is on the macro level as well.
That makes sense.
I have a friend whose mom always told her, she said, don't worry, you were born a champion. You already got number 1 out of like millions.
Out of like 14 million, yeah.
Wow.
It's true.
Yeah.
Okay, there's like so much to unpack here. I feel like we're like not going to get that far in the next hour, but it's like it's the whole, so it's basically everything we're saying is based on the assumption that there's like this, these biological categories of male and female, and that they have certain characteristics, and that those characteristics, this biological reality, like produces these categories of masculine and feminine, and that there's like archetypal similarities across all cultures between those two polarities, because of the biological reality we all share. Like, that's basically the assumption behind this whole thing, right?
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, so I think a lot of this comes out of just dualities. A lot of this just comes out of like the need for the human mind to draw lines between things. And so the line between males and females is very easy to draw because it's very obvious and visible.
A lot of people question it.
Question what?
Like the sexual dimorphism, really, or like what's called like the gender binary. There's like, sex is like male and female, and gender is like masculine and feminine. Or, and then it's not really clear where men and women.
Oh yeah.
To be honest, I didn't really get a whole lot of sort of gender dimorphism when going through maps of meaning. That almost seems like sort of secondary to just his broader concept of meaning is ascribed on sort of a relative basis for the organism that have roots in biology, which both give rise to myths, mythologies, and traditions, and then the traditions inform our actions, kind of in a cycle. But in terms of like, I mean, obviously, male and female is a separation that occurs right throughout life and is sort of a given. I didn't really see maps of meaning as necessarily the point. I didn't really see it as attempting to be illustrative of the difference between men and women as much as illustrative of the general biological origins of mythology and tradition and behavior. Yeah.
The whole point of maps of meaning, as far as I can tell, is explaining not what there is or what there was, but how people thought about stuff, how people used stories in order to approach the unknown, right? So just because a person is a particular biological gender doesn't mean that you can necessarily, know their whole personality. It just means that you might be able to infer some things about it.
It does say though that like these biological realities of male and female, like what you're saying, like you said that like the argument is that like the femininity is associated with the unknown in part because of like female genitalia and the female reproductive system. It's of a more mysterious nature than the male reproductive system. So because of that, like femininity comes to be, I guess it's a women are more associated, like the female is like more associated with like the mystery of reproduction, like the primordial womb, like all that like determines what femininity is on an archetypal level, like the level that would be cross-cultural, the level that would be like most closely associated with our biology, and then everything kind of. So it's not that all women or all females would have these specific characteristics, but it's that femininity archetypally is connected to biology.
Why do you think through a lot of religions, particularly in Judeo-Christianity, does there seem to be sort of, a repressive aspect towards women, a negative aspect towards women? It seems like that's a constant or an often repeated and often observed aspect of that tradition. And I'm not sure that's, like a lot of people, I think rightly have a problem with that kind of mindset. Was that just a misinterpretation? Like where does that?
Can you give some examples?
I can address.
Not a very well-formed question, but hopefully y'all can answer it.
Okay, maybe Juan wants an example.
Yeah, because like I don't know what you're talking about specifically. Like I know that people make noise, but like part of the problem is if we're addressing kind of like, like if we don't have specific critiques about whatever topic, then we can't really address them.
Anthony mentioned, the Judeo-Christian tradition, that's analogous to that's equal to the church, basically. I mean, like, I guess before Christ, there was Judaism, and then after Christ, there was the church, and the church is a very hierarchical, patriarchal structure, and to this day, women are not allowed to be priests. So maybe that's an example.
No,
Well,
I
I'll
don't.
try and be a little more. Go ahead, Arielle. Sorry.
Yeah, okay. I would say, as for examples, one of the main examples, or the most fundamental examples I can think of, is the fact that in the Judeo-Christian, and it's really like the Abrahamic tradition, because it includes like Islam and the Druze and Baha'i and Rastafari. But then the Abrahamic tradition, there's one God, and that God is masculine or male. And so that's a pretty big departure from all previous religions. And you can go into like specifics, like you can go into specifics in the original text, like Paul, who says, wives obey your husbands, slaves obey your masters. That's like a thing you could arguably say is very patriarchal, and it's in the Bible itself. And you can find examples from the Old Testament. And I think the problem with looking at stuff from the church is you can separate the church and the religion. Like, it's easy to say that like the church is a corruption of the religion, and it is in various ways. It's hard to see. It's hard to distinguish the ways that the church corrupts the original text and the way that the church authentically embodies the original text.
So are you saying that the original text has God being sort of both male and female, or are you saying that, and that the church corrupts that, or are you saying that?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there's different levels of analysis, where if you're making the argument that the Abrahamic tradition is sexist, you can look at real life, like the church, how it's been actualized. You can look at the original text, so like specific sexist things it says about men and women, if they exist. But I think the most fundamental thing is the fact that in that tradition, God is pretty unambiguously identified as male or masculine, and with the masculine, and it's a very archetypally masculine character.
Okay, and how does the church corrupt that?
I don't think the church corrupts that. That's not what I was trying to say.
Oh, okay.
But
where's the corruption that was happening? Sorry, I heard you say that.
I think the example you gave of like priests being exclusively male, you can make the argument that that's a corruption of like you don't necessarily know that relates to the original text. You don't necessarily, like, the original text doesn't necessarily say that has to be the case. There's not an example.
I would say it's at least conceivable that maybe there's a connection between the God being male and the staff of the religious organization being male.
Yeah, I agree, but I guess I want to kind of get back to Anthony's original question, because about the, like, what was your original question, Anthony? It was about the Judeo-Christian.
So in my question, I think I kind of assumed that that there's sort of a repressive element and aspect against women, sort of a patriarchal, male-dominated sort of overtones to not just the expression of the text in religion, but to the text itself. But maybe we should explore that a little bit and try and see if we can, like Juan said, we need specific, it wasn't a critique, but more maybe specific examples. The first and easiest one would be Eve. Like, who is the one that committed the original sin? Eve is the one that plucked the fruit and gave it to Adam. And that was what, delved humanity into original sin. So in a way, that blame has gotten placed on the feminine as a very deep matter of course of that text and of that tradition.
But you could also lay the blame at the feet of the devil who tempted Eve in the first place.
Or God.
Yeah, I'm not saying we wouldn't.
God, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we can lay it at God as well. But no doubt, there's still an element of blame that is clearly placed on Eve, on the feminine, in that story, as well as the devil. And if we think even more broadly, of course, God itself will in the text, it's a he basically.
Yeah, I'm a bit confused about kind of like the underlying assumptions of this conversation, the specific sub conversation we're having, because. Like if the roles had been reversed in the Bible or in the sort of ancient books, we could have the same argumentation as to why are the roles in the different opposite sort of situation, and it makes me wonder are these ancient stories, are they a description of observed kind of patterns, or are they a prescription as to what ought to be, or what is the purpose of the stories? and
Well,
I would say that it's sort of like a mix, like it's to some degrees to like keep order or keep some sort of stability, right? But at the same time, it's sort of dealing with like fundamental kind
So
of.
does Peterson talk about that? Like why specifically in that story Eve was picked to eat the fruit before Adam?
yeah, he kind of does. There's a whole
Okay.
chapter about it.
All right. I guess I haven't gotten there. You and
Yeah, I'm only about
Arielle and
briefly.
Anthony, you guys have both read the book, right?
Yeah, I mean, he basically kind of blames Adam worse than Eve.
Yeah.
But I mean, one, like how do you interpret the fact that God is masculine in the Judeo-Christian tradition or in the Abrahamic tradition?
I mean, I haven't read Maps of Meaning, so I don't really. I've only seen some of the episodes. So I'm not sure I totally sort of get what the underlying sort of foundations of that dichotomy are. But I would sort of say that if God is masculine, which I'm not even sure, I haven't looked at the Bible either to sort of see like the exact sort of quotes or what the context of the writing is. But if it is masculine, I would probably say that it's around order and like sort of the ordering of the chaos, right? So like the only reason why God has sort of emerged as a sort of, and it's a monotheistic God. It's not a sort of a God among gods. It's like the God, the ones that you should sort of aim for and ignore the other ones, right? It's not a polytheistic sort of vision of the world.
Yeah, I
It's
mean, so
like the good order, like it's order, like order that is truthful, right? And for some reason, that's like it's not that God is male. It's that God is sort of masculine, in that it's about the sort of the proper categorization of things. Why is that not feminine? Do the women not, does the feminine not involve in categorization? And I don't know.
okay, so I think what's important is that the Old Testament God is kind of a tyrant, kind of a dictator. Like he's a hard ass, and that's the tyrannical father. Like he's almost that archetype. And I haven't
Here's the
gotten to the
dichotomy.
part in the book where he talks about Christianity, but I would assume that that's part of it. Like basically, it is this just masculine force that has all these rules, right? And it has this code that you're supposed to follow, and it's like everybody must follow this code, and and you better watch out. You better be God fearing. You better watch out if you step out of line.
There's an argument. There's an argument in second wave feminism that there's an argument in second wave feminism that over the course of human history there was a shift between a more feminine God, between originally in like horticulturalist and like hunter-gatherer societies, like pre-agricultural, most societies had a female god or like a feminine god and like a great mother archetype. And what happened was, as time went on, like societies became agricultural, because agriculturalism kind of is what forces like a patriarchal society. Because in like a horticulturalist society, when you're like tilling like with like a hand till, like anyone can use a hand till to like to plant a garden. Like even a pregnant woman can do that. Once you get into an agricultural society and you have like draft animals, it's like a pregnant woman can't operate a draft animal. It's like it creates like a high risk of miscarriage. So you end up with a situation where the men are basically bringing in all the food, and that's where you get like the rise of patriarchal society. And you also get like a need to reproduce a lot, to have more babies, to have more soldiers, and it creates the dynamic where women become more of a resource than a contributor or than an agent. And so the argument is that as society moved in that direction, that's where you get things like the Marduk story, the Marduk and Tiamat, where like it used to be that there was like that is probably an evolution of an earlier time where there was like a male and female god, or a masculine and feminine god, and then you end up with this story where the feminine god is like just the feminine is destroyed. And so you end up with a lot of stories across cultures where a masculine divine archetype destroys a feminine archetype very like dramatically. And you see that, yeah, in Greek mythology too. And then it's you get to the point with like with Judaism or the ancient Israelite religion where with one god, and there's the feminine is completely absent, and there's traces in the Bible that indicate that there used to be like a feminine counterpart to the male god, but she was like written out. And so
Wow.
according to this argument, which is like a 1970s second wave feminism kind of argument, the ultimate progression of the rise of the patriarchy is the complete absence of the divine feminine and the centering of this like sole, like unitary divine masculine god.
Is that something that serves us or sort of hurts us in the society and culture we find ourselves in today?
It depends what you're aiming for.
So basically what you're saying is that a parallel is drawn between the rise of agriculture and the creation of the universe in a lot of these myths, where, as you said, the female gets defeated or whatever by this male force. Of course, Marduk is I guess he's a male father figure, but he's also the knower. There's like the known and the unknown and the knower. So he plays maybe both roles. I think when in that story, he plays the role of the knower, but then subsequently he becomes kind of the male father figure. But yeah, basically you're saying the rise of agriculture is almost like the creation of the universe in that sense.
So could we look at some of the chaos that exists in society at the moment? Could we look at that as like kind of a healthy part of this cycle?
Yeah.
You know, in turn, like, so in order to bring order, to make growth, the hero has to venture into the unknown. So are we maybe at a place in society right now where it would be useful for us to venture into the unknown, to experiment with different states of culture, to create new traditions and stories, and then at some point to come back towards the other direction? Is that maybe something that the left could actually, some of the leftists might be experimenting with that right now? And certainly in chaos, there's a lot of danger there, but perhaps we'll bring a few new things that are useful and encapsulate that into modern tradition.
What Peterson is trying to do with 12 Rules for Life. He says an antidote to chaos. I guess maybe that's your point.
Yeah, I mean, what I kind of see, it's not coming to us. Sorry, just like a technical thing. Okay, like what I kind of see is like, so we're talking about before, like there's like the Abrahamic tradition and like these traditions dominated by the divine masculine come along with like agriculture, which is around the same time that women kind of stop being able to take an active role in the production of food. So that is the state of affairs for like whatever, like 10,000, 15,000 years. And now we get into a time again where you get like the Industrial Revolution and like the aftermath of that, like kind of a post-industrial age we're in. You see a situation again where women are once again taking on a productive role. Like, I don't mean like productive and economically productive.
Yeah.
Like we're producing economic value and food, not literal food, but like we're bringing in the food again, like we were in the pre-agricultural time. And so at around the same time, you see like the Abrahamic tradition crumbling, or like it's no longer the universal consensus, and it's like it's leaving us in this time of like great like chaos and change, where like the divine masculine, like the divine feminine, is like really like asserting itself over like the last century or so, and you see like environmentalism, like this like push towards like equality of all people, a very like most obviously blatantly like women's rights, like freedom for women. And I think what Jordan Peterson is arguing is that it's creating an imbalance in the opposite direction, where like masculinity and like divine masculine is being like denigrated, and he's trying to like, I think he's
well, there's a huge amount of chaos right now. So one of the things that happened recently was the invention of the birth control pill, which liberated women from their biological sort of
consequences.
Massive biological risk and cost of pregnancy, which is like a life-changing sort of thing that can happen. And so it liberated them from that. But there's also like all these negative consequences, like health consequences from it. There's a lot of infertility, a lot of couples having a hard time sort of having children. And so in a sense, like the feminine, the life of the feminine has sort of been, radically changed by technology. And so now women are, because of World War II and women entering the workforce, and then taxes rising, and then now it's like you kind of have to have both people working, or else you can't sustain a household because of all kinds of economic and sort of tyrannical state things, and arguably, right? Then the women are taking a sort of more masculine role, in the sense like you have to go out there and be in conflict with other people and not be sort of in a compassionate sort of caretaking kind of role, which is maybe more. I mean, maybe this is sexist or something, but it seems to me like that's more of a feminine role, more sort of relationship oriented, that sort of than kind of like that competitive sort of get to the top, sort of hunt the animal type of role. And so women are sort of kind of being incentivized or sort of pushed towards a masculine, and going, you know, to some degree, going to a more masculine sort of space. And then at the same time, like the masculine is being attacked by all these sort of different cultural forces, right? And so men are becoming more feminine, right? So women are becoming more masculine, becoming more feminine, and everything just kind of like weird. And that's the chaos that I think we're sort of. That's what I'm seeing. I don't know. I mean, like,
But for me, like you say, oh, there's a huge amount of chaos, and I don't.
Cultural. It hasn't been. The problem is that it hasn't been politicized effectively yet. But like we're seeing it in politics, and so people are going back to culture to try to talk about it and figure out what's going on. There's this idea by Andrew Breitbart that politics is downstream from culture, which makes perfect sense, because culture is more around like the sort of the psychological general consensus.
Well,
whereas politics is like infrastructure and enforcement, regardless of X or whatever, right?
Yeah. So going back to earlier, so this drive towards the liberty movement, like the freedom movement, is kind of almost like the chaos movement, right? Which makes me think, oh, maybe this is the divine feminine asserting itself. Like maybe like us, you know, these crypto people, you know, like maybe that's the divine feminine. You know, maybe we're like on that side of the coin, at least politically right now.
Well, in terms of chaos, I don't see so much chaos as existing in necessarily the order or our day-to-day lives. In fact, if anything, our lives have far more order. Like the house that we're sitting in, right, has been a construction of a lot of industrious orderliness. However, on a sort of mental aspect, on a psychological aspect, I think it is true that we're seeing a lot more chaotic manifestations in people's mentality across the whole of society. Which is, you know, that's probably a good thing in a way, and certainly when we talk about chaos, it's only a very small percentage, a very tiny fraction of that chaos that we actually find something good and then we take that and use it. Generally, experimentations are characterized by failure after failure until you get that one shining moment of success, and that's kind of the whole purpose. That's the whole point of chaos. You have so much variety, so much randomness and variability that you have to go explore it and then find the one thing amongst a sea of things that you don't need, and bring back that one thing.
Yeah.
So there's
one thing I find that there's so much craziness out there in terms of we like to talk about left, so like use that as our punching bag maybe. One thing that I really personally I think we could benefit from as a society is more exploration into this chaos. Not necessarily the type of chaos that a lot of leftists are experimenting with. They've gone too far, and I think at this point some corrective action is needed to assert to recognize the biological realities. But I still see a lot of the old traditions, many aspects of those traditions still need to be changed, and maybe we haven't found suitable replacements. And maybe they don't need to be changed entirely, but they need to be adjusted, they need to be updated. And so I think we still have a lot more exploration in this sort of chaotic realm, to find the things that will adequately integrate into the traditions that we have, to take the good parts of those traditions and modify them for everyone's benefit.
Right, and this is what I was going to say. So also, from the standpoint of the established order, the world probably looks increasingly chaotic. Because from that perspective, what's happening is all very unknown. But they're causing it. They're causing it because they become too rigid in their thinking. And so what the decentralized movements on the internet are helping is, as you were saying, Anthony, is helping explore that unknown territory. And to the established order, exploring that unknown territory is very scary, because traditionally those territories should not be explored. You know, that's part of the mythology, is that, oh my God, like, you know, you know, all these different new types of sexualities, all these new types of gender identification, you know, that's very scary to the established order because it's like, you know, it's like upending their version of reality. But I think it's part of the background nature, you know, that they're ignoring, and because they're ignoring it, it's coming up to bite them in the butt.